اعوذ باللہ من الشیطان الرجیم بسم اللہ الرحمن الرحیم السلام علیکم ورحمۃ اللہ وبرکاتہ۔ مومنین کرام، ہم سے مجالس کی آج فورتھ مجلس بسلسلہ شہادت حضرت امام حسن العسکری علیہ الصلوۃ والسلام حسینیت شناف کیلگری میں منعقد ہو رہی ہے، اور ان 5 سپیچ سے ریموٹلی مولانا سید اسد جعفری صاحب ٹورنٹو سے براہ راست خطاب کر رہے ہیں۔ آج 5 مجالس کی چوتھی سپیچ ہے، اور کل یہاں پر شب میلاد عید زہرا کے حوالے سے پروگرام ہوگا، اور وہ بھی ٹھیک اسی طرح 7 بجے صلاۃ المغربین، اور پھر قصیدہ منقبت، اور پھر قبلہ مولانا سید اسد جعفری صاحب کی سپیچ جو ہوگی ٹھیک 8 بجے شروع ہوگی۔ تو آج کی اس مجلس اعزاء سے شروعات کے لیے میں ماسٹر رفیف کو دعوت دوں گا تلاوت کلام پاک کے لیے۔ اس کے بعد مجاز جعفری بھائی کا سلام ہوگا، اور پھر ہمارے جو نوجوان مرثیہ خان ہیں بلال، میسم اور عیسیٰ، وہ مرثیہ خوانی کریں گے، اور 8 بجے انشاءاللہ مولانا سید اسد جعفری صاحب خطاب فرمائیں گے۔ اب میں ملتمس ہوں عفیف سے آئیں وہ اور تلاوت کلام پاک سے مجلس کا آغاز کریں۔ بر محمد وآل محمد بلندتر صلوات۔
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. إذا الشمس كورت وإذا النجوم انكدرت وإذا الجبال سيرت وإذا العشار عطلت وإذا الوحوش حشرت وإذا البحار سجرت وإذا النفوس زوجت وإذا الموءودة سئلت بأي ذنب قتلت وإذا الصحف نشرت وإذا السماء كشطت وإذا الجحيم سعرت وإذا الجنة أزلفت علمت نفس ما أحضرت. صدق الله العلي العظيم.
ایک سورہ فاتحہ کی درخواست کرتا ہوں تمام شہداء کے لیے اور علماء فقہ کے لیے۔ بر محمد وآل محمد صلوات۔ اللہم صلی علی محمد وآل محمد۔ خدا حافظ ہے رخصت کی گھڑی، اے کربلا والوں خدا حافظ، خدا حافظ، سلام آخری سلام آخری ہے کربلا والوں، خدا حافظ۔ نہ ہم سے ہو سکا کچھ بھی ادا، حق میزبانی کا ہے یہ شرمندگی، ہے یہ شرمندگی ہے کربلا والوں، خدا حافظ۔ تمہارے ساتھ زہرا بھی یہاں تشریف لائی تھی، یہ عزت بھی ملی، یہ عزت بھی ملی ہے کربلا والوں، خدا حافظ۔ ہمارے گھر کی رونق بھی تمہارے ساتھ جاتی ہے، اداسی چھا گئی، اداسی چھا گئی ہے کربلا والوں، خدا حافظ۔ تمہارے غم میں روتے روتے مر جاتے تو اچھا تھا، یہ حسرت رہ گئی، یہ حسرت رہ گئی ہے کربلا والوں، خدا حافظ۔ کسی صورت بہلتا ہی نہیں، دل کیسے بہلائیں، عجب ہے بے کلی، عجب ہے بے کلی ہے کربلا والوں، خدا حافظ۔ پھر اگلے سال ہم یوں ہی صفے ماتم بچھائیں گے، رہی گر زندگی، رہی گر زندگی ہے کربلا والوں، خدا حافظ۔ بر محمد وآل محمد صلوات۔
بر محمد وآل محمد صلوات۔ سورہ فاتحہ۔ جب زخم کھا کے بنتے علی کے پسر گرے، جلتی زمیں پہ تشنا جگر خون میں تر گرے، پھول پڑ گیا کہ خاک پہ رش کے کمر گرے سن کر حسین قلب و جگر تھام کر گرے سن کر حسین قلب و جگر تھام کر گرے عباس دل پہ داغ علم کھا کے رہ گئے جعفر کے پھول دشت میں مرجھا کے رہ گئے جعفر کے پھول دشت میں مرجھا کے رہ گئے باجے بجے سپاہے اڈو میں جو ایک بار دوڑے پہ آ کے کھا گئے اکبر بہالے اے بیبیوں میری پھوپھی اماں سے ہوشیار گرزوں سے فرق اونو محمد ہوئے فگار گرزوں سے فرق اونو محمد ہوئے فگار آئے تھے ہم بھی صرف خبر کے سنانے کو جاتے ہیں شہ غریبوں کے لاشیں اٹھانے کو جاتے ہیں شہ غریبوں کے لاشیں اٹھانے کو خیمے میں تڑپتی رہی زینب حزین لاشوں کے بھانجوں کے وہاں پہنچے شاہدین دیکھا کہ گشک ہے کہ دونوں وہ محجبین بہتا ہے خون پہ بات کی طاقت ذرا نہیں بہتا ہے خون بات کی طاقت ذرا نہیں ڈھالیں گری ہے چھٹ کے ڈلیروں کے ہاتھ سے قبضے مگر چھٹے نہیں شہروں کے ہاتھ سے قبضے مگر چھٹے نہیں شہروں کے ہاتھ سے شانے ہلا ہلا کے پکارے شاہ خدا مامون سارے ہوش میں آؤ تو ایک ذرا کچھ حال دل سناتے ہوئے جاؤ میں فدا یہ سن کے دونوں شیروں نے کی آنکھیں نیم یہ سن کے دونوں شیروں نے کی آنکھیں نیم دیکھا رکے امام تو گھبرا کے رہ گئے یاد آ گئی وہ بات کے تھرا کے رہ گئے یاد آ گئی وہ بات کے تھرا کے رہ گئے جب زخم کھا کے بنتے
بلال معصم اور عیسیٰ کی صحت و سلامتی کے لیے بلندتر صلوات ہما صلی علی محمد وآل محمد وعجل فرجہم۔ مومنین کرام، کل 5 سپیچز کی آخری سپیچ ہوگی جو شب عید زہرا کے حوالے سے یہاں پر منعقد ہوگی، اور اسی طرح منڈے کو جشن عید زہرا کا جو پروگرام ہوگا ٹھیک 7 بجے شام شروع ہوگا، اور محفل میلاد سے ہمارے ریزیڈنٹ عالم مولانا سید حاجی حسن صاحب خطاب فرمائیں گے۔ اس کے علاوہ 17 ربیع الاول کے جشن میلاد میں جتنے بھی بچوں اور بچیوں نے اور جتنے بھی حسینے کے والنٹیئرس نے ایام اعضاء میں جہاں جہاں بھی والنٹیئر کیا ہے، وہ پیرنٹ سے گزارش ہے وہ اپنے نام ایگزیکٹوز کو دے دیں تاکہ ان کی حوصلہ افزائی کے لیے یہاں پر ان کے والنٹیئر کے حوالے سے ان کو سرٹیفکیٹس اور انعامات تقسیم کیے جائیں گے 17 ربیع الاول کے جشن میں انشاءاللہ۔ اور میں بہت ہی شکر گزار ہوں تمام والنٹیئرز کا جنہوں نے 40 کے جلوس میں اور پہلے دن عشر اعضاء کے عشر اولا سے لے کے عشر 40 کے اختتام تک جو بھی آج تک کی مجالس میں جہاں جہاں والنٹیئر کیا اور ہمارے ساتھ تعاون کیا ہے، کووڈ پینڈیمک کے حوالے سے جتنی بھی سیفٹی گائیڈ لائنز رکھی تھی ان کو گائیڈ لائنز کو فالو کرتے ہوئے میرے خیال سے نارتھ امریکہ میں بھی الحمدللہ حسین اشرف کیلگری کے سینٹر میں جتنے پروگرامز ان پرسن ہوئے کہیں پہ بھی نہیں ہوئے، لیکن الحمدللہ مومنین کے تعاون سے اور قبلہ مولانا سید حاجی حسن صاحب کی قیادت میں جو پروگرامز اللہ تعالیٰ ہم سب کو ان کے ان پروگرامز پہ جتنے بھی یہاں پر سلام مرثیہ تلاوت کلام پاک حدیث کی تعریف میں یا قرآن کی تفسیر کے حوالے سے مجالس میں جو تقاریر ہوئی ہے، چاہے وہ ریموٹلی ہوئی یا ان پرسن حسین میں ان سے اللہ تعالیٰ ہمیں ان پہ عمل کرنے کی توفیق دے اور حسین علیہ السلام کے نقش قدم پر چلنے کی توفیق دے۔ قبل اس کے میں قبلہ مولانا سید اسد جعفری صاحب کو خطاب کے لیے دعوت دوں، چند اشعار آپ لوگوں کی سماعت کے لیے۔ جہاں میں دین کبریا کا کیا حسین نظام ہے، جہاں میں دین کبریا کا کیا حسین نظام ہے، کہ ابتدا رسول ہے اور انتہا امام ہے۔ وہ راستہ دکھا گئے یہ راستہ بنا گئے، وہ راستہ دکھا گئے یہ راستہ بنا گئے، وہ مصطفیٰ کا فرض تھا یہ مرتضیٰ کا کام ہے۔ نبی بقائے دین حق علی بنائے دین حق، نہ اس میں کچھ کلام ہے نہ اس میں کچھ کلام۔ اللہ تعالیٰ سے دعا ہے کہ ان مجالس کے توسل سے ہمیں اہل بیت اطہار علیہ السلام کے نقش قدم پر چلنے کی توفیق دے۔ اب بلا کسی تاخیر کے میں ملتمس ہوں قبلہ مولانا سید اسد جعفری صاحب سے وہ مجلس اعضاء سے خطاب فرمائیں۔ بلندتر صلوات۔ اللہم صل علی محمد وآل محمد۔
If I can please ask you all to recite a Surah Fatiha for your marhumin and for mine, and please include the Shuhada of Islam, inshallah. Fatiha. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen ar-Rahman ar-Rahim Maliki yawmiddin. Iyaka na'budu wa iyaka nasta'in. Ihdina as-sirata al-mustaqim. Sirata al-ladhina أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله الذي لا يبلغ مدحته القائلون ولا يحصي نعماءه العادون ولا يؤدي حقه المجتحدون، الذي لا يدركه بعد الحمم ولا يناله غوص الفطن، ثم الصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين، حبيب قلوبنا وطبيب نفوسنا وشفيع ذنوبنا، سيدنا ومولانا أبي القاسم محمد. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وعجل فرجهم، وآل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين المظلومين، لا سيما بقية الله في الأرضين صاحب العصر والزمان، خليفة الرحمن إمام الإنس والجان، ولعن الله أعداهم أجمعين إلى يوم الدين. أما بعد، فقد قال الله وقوله الحق. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. يا أيها الذين آمنوا قوا أنفسكم وأهليكم نارا، صدق الله العلي العظيم. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وعجل فرجهم. Raising God-centric children has been our ongoing topic. Tonight is lecture number 4. And first of all, before I begin, let me send my condolences on behalf of all of you and your families to the Imam of our time, the Maraji, on the Shab and the night of the Shahadat of our 11th Imam, Imam Hassan al-Askari alayhi salatu wassalam. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give the Imam of our time sabr tonight, and may we be those who are chosen to be beside the Imam of our time, inshallah, doing his mission. The 11th Imam was born on the 10th of Rabiul Akhir. The year was 232 AH. And he was Shaheed on the 8th of Rabiul Awwal, 260 AH. Born on the 10th of Rabiul Akhir, Shaheed on the 8th of Rabiul Awwal, 260 AH. He lived a life of 28 years, of which 6 of them, he was an Imam. There's many things to learn from this amazing Imam, and the things that he left behind for the Shias, the situation he lived in, his ability to fulfill the responsibility of his time, even though the situation around him was not conducive to those responsibilities. And I want to link our topic that I've been with you now for the past 4 nights there in Calgary at Hosseini Association. And, we've been talking about the idea of tarbiyat and raising God-centered children. And we talked about many, many things, from the idea of hadaf shanasi to the idea last time where I talked about the idea of, raising them to be distinct individuals, making a family identity, you and your spouse sitting down and saying, what kind of children do we want to raise? And then understanding what tools do I need to get, to get that tarbiyat done. Okay. Simply going along with the flow nowadays, simply trying to get the best of both worlds nowadays, is not going to happen. As I mentioned last night, gone are those days you can sit down, you can watch a half-an-hour sitcom with your family. You can't. Sometimes you can't even watch a commercial with your kids, right? So there has to be a conscious decision, a conscious choice by the family, by the parents, or by the single parent, depending on what situation you're in, about what kind of family identity do we want to cultivate. Okay? There's got to be a little bit of a plan, an investment, a talk. It just can't be, okay, take them to every jashan, take them to every majlis, here and there, teach them there's a salawat, maybe a bismillah here and there. Otherwise, inshallah, when they get the age of baligh, then they'll figure it out on their own. Right? No madrasa, no real, deen inside the home, no akhlaq shown by the parents, nothing. Right? And then, as I mentioned in the very first day, the input will always match the output will always match the input. I mentioned the idea that if your child plays with instruments all their whole life, they're going to grow up to be musicians. If they grow up with the tasbih and the Quran, let's say, for example, they'll grow up to be mu'mineen. It's a very simple equation, right? Sometimes our parents think that, some miracle or some switch will turn on. That, look, I can live, a somewhat, secular life inside of my home. No deen really, but hopefully my kids turn out to be super pious. On what basis do you have that expectation? Was there any work being done? Are there sacrifices being made? Is your akhlaq any better, let's say, for example? Right? All those things are there. But before I get to the content of tonight's discussion, because as Riyaz mentioned, tonight is the last official night of Ayam Azad. Tomorrow, inshallah, we will celebrate the Jashan together. I know you have your official Jashan with Sayyid Hadi on Monday, but if I can be shamil in that khushi as well, then tomorrow night will be Shab Zahra, as Riyaz coined very well. And, so tonight will be the last Al-Vida Majlis of this Ayam Azad, this very unique Ayam Azad. And, we'll touch upon that a little bit in the Masa'ib tonight. We examined the life of Imam al-Askari, and first of all, let's understand a couple of things. He didn't live a very long life, 28 years. Only 6 of them he was an Imam. In the majority of those 6 years, he was either under house arrest or he was imprisoned. Okay? From the very, very beginning of his life, he set himself aside from everybody else. I talked about fada'il and fadilat and distinction last night. I talked about the fact that you have to raise your child to be distinct and raise your child to be a little bit different, and for them to be okay with not going in with social norms. Okay. We have one reports in our tradition that talk about the fact that there was a man who came across a bunch of children who were playing with their toys. And off to the side was a young boy, didn't have a toy with him, and he was crying. It's a very famous story. Now the man thought that, okay, the kid is crying because he has no toys. He approached this young boy and says, "Are you upset because you don't have any toys? Would you like for me to buy you some toys to play with?" And the child says to this man that we were not created in this world to play with toys. And the man says, that's, the story says he's very taken back by this profound statement by a very young child. He says, "Have you not read the Quran?" He says, "Enlighten me." He says, Surah 23, verse number 115, talks about the fact that, do you think you were created in vain and that you won't return back to us? He says, "It's very profound of you." He says, "My only dua, why I'm crying right now, my only dua is that sometimes I watch my mother create fire to cook with. And I know that she uses the small logs to increase the fire to get to the bigger logs. If that fire gets to the big logs, the fire now becomes nice and strong. And my fear, my dua to Allah is that I'm not those small logs for the fire in the hellfire." And when he asked this man, who is this young man? Someone tells him, this is Hassan al-Askari, the son of Imam Hadi. So from a very young age, he was unique. There was 5 sons that Imam Hadi had, and Imam Askari was not the oldest, right? Muhammad was a very pious man, right? And in that same group of children, there was also Jaffri. Jaffri was not so pious. Afterwards, he became Jaffri al-Kadhab, the one who would lie a lot, okay? The one who actually caused some damage at one point towards the mission of the Ahlul Bayt. And my only point there is that this was a man, Imam Hassan al-Askari, who proved himself to be pious from a very, very early age in his life. And the other point that I want to make here very quickly is that to my parents out there, connecting with my topic, sometimes we'll see, and it's possible, even when it comes to the Ahlul Bayt and the Imam siblings, that not everybody, all the siblings are on the exact same page when it comes to faith. There are those who actually will be considered to be not religious in this day and age. Imam Askari had a brother. Imam Hadi had a son who simply wasn't considered to be religious, who allowed the greed of this world to get the better of him. So it's possible that my parents can do everything possible. I always say this, my parents can do everything they could possibly do to create a home environment of deen and piety and God consciousness, and still, as kids, we don't come out to be God-centric. There's a lot of my parents out there right now, they're listening to me, who work day in and day out with their spouse to create a very pious, God-fearing environment inside the home, and still there's 1, maybe 2 kids that always end up off the path, God forbid, or maybe not at the same intensity as they would like it as parents, and they end up, hitting their head against the wall. What did we do wrong with? And sometimes it's as simple to tell them, and I do sometimes, that you did nothing wrong. You gave him the tarbiyat, he never took it. Never took it. Remember my upside down cup story a couple of nights ago. All the tools can be there to accept the tarbiyat. If the capacity is not there in the child to accept the tarbiyat and the nurturing, it's not going to work. Now his laqab of al-Askari, Askar literally means army in Arabic. Askari is a place that is an army base. Okay. There are certain cities in Iraq back then that were only army bases. There was no city, there was no buildings, nobody living there. They had a certain purpose, and that's it. Later on, they became cities where people now would go and inhabit themselves in, and it become an actual city. Samarra, for the longest time, was an army-based and known as a army-based town, right? An askar, okay? Later on, it became Samarra, right? And so his laqab was somebody who was obviously raised and spent his time in Samarra. He became al-Askari. Okay. But I think the biggest service he did for us, 11th Imam, is the fact that when the Abbasid Khulafa realized that this was a special individual, a special young man. Remember, he didn't make it to 30 in this world. When they realized that, and they also realized what? They also realized that the birth of Imam Mahdi was imminent. If we have all those traditions in our books about the Prophet now telling us that 12 Imams after, the last one, of course, will be the Mahdi. He'll fill the world with justice as is filled with injustice. All these things, bring down the tyrant, bring down the oppressor, right? All of those who are looking now to establish their own tyrannical regime in this world understood that one thorn in our side, one barrier, is the arrival of the Mahdi. And they also knew that this 11th Imam was the father of that Mahdi. So we have to now what? Watch him very, very closely. They let Imam Hadi kind of roam free a little bit, right? The Abbasid Khulafa. Imam Hadi enjoyed several years of freedom. That's why we have, many du'as and many ahadith that we have from Imam Hadi, because he actually had a moment to spread the deen. Imam Jawad was also given, to some degree, a little bit of freedom, but these Abbasid rulers that Imam Askari was living under were evil men, especially Mu'tamid, who was the one, of course, who ultimately poisoned the Imam. But when there were a couple of attempts now to kill our 11th Imam and that never panned out, they said the best thing to do is to imprison the man. And I want you to understand this portion of his life very carefully for me. Imprison the man, keep it under house arrest. In that house arrest, they would feed him very, very, very minimal food. In the 2 years under house arrest, he became frail in bones. Then they moved him to a solitary confinement area, all in the hopes that if he was out of the sight of the Shias and the sight of his followers, then they would also crumble and wither away. But herein lies the beauty of our 11th Imam. And this is where I'll connect the 11th Imam to my topic: raising pious children. From that very solitary confinement, he upheld his responsibility. He somehow managed to create a secret Shia chain of guidance. He somehow was able to now, in the wake of this jail term, somehow understand that even though I am limited, I'm still able to do what I can. Okay? This system of marajiyat that we enjoy today, and I'll use the word enjoy today to be our avenue of guidance and hidayat. May Allah prolong all of our marajih's life, inshallah, is a system that was perfected and established by our 11th Imam during his time in jail. Understanding this is the prime opportunity for me to begin to train my Shias to how to now survive without the Imam present, hadir, in front of you. Yes, he's accessible, but not so much. He understood that, look, when my son, the Mahdi, comes and he goes into his Ghaibat al-Sughra when he's 5 years old, and then Ghaibat al-Sughra 68 years afterwards, they have to now understand, the Shias, how to move on without the Imam being present. So this elaborate scheme now, and then maybe that may not be the best word, this elaborate system of guidance where he would now ensure that people in various cities where there are Shia strongholds, they would be able now not only to have access to me, but he would train the pious ones in each city, maybe a group of them, to be able now to answer the questions that came about from the Shias, just like he would answer them from jail. And in the process now, what ends up happening is that even though the man is in jail, he's able to do whatever he can to prolong his mission and fulfill his responsibility. One of the most beautiful tools that you can give your child, and this is not just for somebody who has a child that's 7 years old or 8 years old. I'm saying even those of you out there who have teenage boys or teenage girls about to enter university, in university right now, early 20s, mid 20s, right? A teenager, I don't know. One of them is the idea that even though you're not given the best tools to propagate the deen, or you're given tools now or barriers to bring down your level of piety, understand that even in that situation, the perfection of the believer is to carve his own path towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Let me give you a very simple example. It's a story, really. It's not the best story, but it's a story that brings home the point. And I really want you to focus on the point and not so much the details of the point, okay? So there was this family, okay? Family. Father, mother, and one son. They only had one child. And these three individuals, this family, had an annual tradition that whenever the weather would begin to warm up and it would, be kind of late summer, they begin to kind of plant a vegetable garden in their backyard. Okay, so weather warms up now, the ground is nice and ready. They begin now to kind of dig it up and begin to plant, their tomatoes and their cucumbers and whatever they have to grow. And for years, this was their annual tradition. This is the one thing that they did as a family. Okay. Years had passed now. And the father of the house wakes up one day, looks outside the window. Lo and behold, now the ground is prime now to be, to dig and to, plant this vegetable garden. At this stage in his life, however, the father, the mother, his wife had passed away. His only son was in jail. Okay, please follow the story. He thinks, you know what? It's an annual tradition. I want to make sure that I fulfill that tradition. Let me go ahead and do my best. He grabs his tools. He goes outside. He's an older man now, begins to attempt to dig the ground, but nothing's happening. He's upset. He's dejected. Misses his wife, misses his son. He decides to write his son a letter in jail. Dear son, as you know that the weather has warmed up now, and we have an annual tradition. I did my best to uphold that tradition. I wasn't able to. I'm weak. I wish you were here beside me. Love your father. Okay. The son reads this letter and replies to the father. Says, Dad, don't touch the backyard. Don't touch the backyard. That's where I buried my evidence. He says, buried my evidence. Now the father reads this letter, and before he could finish the letter, there's a knock on the door, opens the door, local police, Secret Service, God knows who else now comes in, right? And they've intercepted all the communication between the father, of course, and the son, right? The son's in jail. There's a case against him looking for any sort of evidence. And the son flat out says that my evidence is buried in the backyard. They storm the house, they get to the backyard, and they begin digging the backyard. They dug the entire backyard, but there's no evidence. There's no evidence. They got upset. They left. What's going on? Wasted my time. The father's confused. Writes his son the letter, telling him exactly what happened. And the son replied saying, Dad, you can begin to plant your vegetable garden now. That's the least that I could do from jail. There was never any evidence. He wrote that knowing full well that there were people who were reading his letters. And he somehow now, from jail now, in his limited capacity, got his job done of digging up the backyard for his father. Sometimes I feel, and maybe I'm wrong, our youth, our young ones today, they feel like they're in jail, they're in prison, they're limited, and they have this defeatist attitude towards the deen. That they think, had I been in Iran or Iraq, let's say, for example, if I lived beside Amir al-Mu'minin in Najaf, for example, or I was, spent all my life in Qum, right? I can hear the adhan from every corner of the city now, Dua Tawassul on television, right? All you see is ruhanis and ulama everywhere. There's ruhaniyat and taqwa in the air. There's ilm in every corner of the city. Of course, I would be an amazing individual. But me, I live in Calgary. I live in Western Canada, right? The weather here is harsh. I live in a very non-Islamic society. I live in an era of social media and consumerism. There's social norms that I have to abide by. On top of that, I don't have the best parents, and for example, who are very pious. I don't go to a Islamic school. I might be the only brown guy in the whole school, right? And prison upon prison upon prison that we place ourselves in. And we just kind of say, well, you know what, God, I do my best. If I can barely do the bare minimum, then that's good enough. But hey, you're the one that put me in Calgary. You're the one that put me in this suburb. You're put me in this school. Blah blah blah. And what do? We preemptively now sabotage our path towards God, thinking for a moment that look, I can't do anything, and that's where we're wrong. And that's where we must abide by the sunnah of Imam al-Askari. In prison now, he was able to somehow, to some extent now, carry the mission forward. Okay. Sometimes I think my youth don't understand that, yes, while they are in prison, no doubt, Hadith says that this dunya is a sujin, is a prison for the mu'min. Absolutely. You can't do a lot of things that are considered to be luxurious in this world. I get it. It doesn't mean that you're not able to fulfill the responsibilities of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. How many youth now call me and tell me, oh, I am this way, early 20s, mid 20s. I am this way, Moulana, because, I had a horrible grade 4 dinya teacher in Sunday school. I am this way because I had one encounter with one alim and one Moulana and one sheikh, and he was rude to me and he gave me a bad answer and he snapped at me. And ever since that moment, 10 years ago now, I had this taste in my mouth for Moulanas. You know how many times I go to Husainia there in Calgary, and some auntie now or some uncle now sits there and judges the way that I dress and looks at me weird and asks me why am I dressed this way, and so I don't go to the center for that one uncle now who makes that comment, right? Jail upon jail upon jail. And we use all these things now that happened 10, 15 years ago to pave our future. And we don't have a growth mindset. And I want my parents to give your child a growth mindset. If you don't have, the common tools to grow, if you don't have the everyday wings to fly, then create one for yourself. Even in a very difficult situation, carve the path towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Find that one small little light that we have. This is the last night of Ayam Azah. From tomorrow night now tomorrow's day, of course, is the day of the Shahadat. We're still, of course, mourning. But tomorrow night after Maghrib, we begin to celebrate. And I mentioned this several times across Ayam Azah, wherever I've gone in these past 2 months and 8 days, is the fact that one of the most beautiful titles that we have of Imam Hussein connecting to the Quran is Al-Fajr. Surah Fajr, many Mufassirin say, is about Imam Hussein. The 10 nights, right? Come back to your Lord, the Nafs al-Mutma'inna discussion, all that is in Surah Fajr. Why is Hussein known as Al-Fajr? Fajr is this small streak of a white light in the dark sky that now tells us it's time for Fajr. You wake up for Fajr awwal-e-vat, you look outside, it's pitch black outside. But it's Fajr time. Fajr is daybreak. Where is the break of day? Small little white called Fajr Sadiq. Enough of a light now to explode itself across an hour and a half. From the Adhan of Fajr till sunrise is an hour and a half. Now all of a sudden the entire sky that was black an hour ago is now slowly but surely now lightening up and brightening up. That's all it takes is one little small crack of light. Imam Hussein is that source of light, is that source of nur for us, is that Fajr for us that illuminates everything else around us. Because he connects us back to the deen. So my youth out there, my young guys out there, you know, I don't mean to come at you and I don't mean to be negative, but let's leave all the excuses, man. Let's forget about some random uncle who volunteers his time on Sunday school trying to teach you wudu and ghusl in grade 4 dinyat, who may have yelled at you one time because you got ghusl irtamasi mixed up with ghusl tartibi, for example. I don't know. And now because of this one volunteer teacher now who comes to you 1 hour a day, 1 hour a week now, the entire deen is just out the window. It happens all the time. So on one side, this idea of powering through the various elements of imprisonment that we have around ourselves. On the other side, when it comes to parents now presenting God to their children, I ask you, even if your kids are older, I ask you, present a God of mercy to your child. You know, I grew up, and I think a lot of guys my age grew up with a God of fear hanging over our heads, a God of punishment. A God of, squeezing of the grave, a God of breaking your ribs, a God of scorpions, a God of burning hell. If you don't do this, God will do this to you. And in the process, my parents believed, and a lot of our parents believed, that fear was the best motivator. And there's no doubt there is a discussion about the justice of God for sure, but the God of love, the God of mercy, the God of forgiveness, the God of compassion is beautiful as well. And a child who's 8 years old, not even 15 years old, in this very dark and difficult world, is always searching for moments of hope and light. I always get the most feedback on my lectures when I talk about things like hope, and talk about things like forgiveness, and talk about things like mercy, and talk about things like self-care and self-love. I always get the most messages about those discussions, because that's where people now really come to Imam Hussein to hear, I want to heal with Hussein. It's very hard for me now to turn towards a God who's always now just wanted to punish me since I was 7, 8 years old. Think about what you're doing to a child, right? At 7 years old, at 9 years old, praying salat beside you, sign the wajib. I've seen fathers who grab their son. He's 7 years old. Stay beside me. Don't move from where. Allahu Akbar. What kind of namaz are we teaching that child? Right? And then later on at 15, 16, 17, when he's laxing towards namaz, you wonder, bacha namaz nahi padhta, Moulana. Of course he's not going to pray namaz. How would you pray namaz in that environment? Would you want to worship God who just wants to squeeze your bones in the grave? No. Instead, what you want to do is you want to now create this God of love and mercy, where any moment of bliss in your child, any moment where you find that the kid is smiling from ear to ear, it could be the fact that he's sitting there having his most favorite flavor at Baskin Robbins. It could be that the whole family is playing a board game. It could be that he's outside, let's say, for example, rollerblading or riding his bike or playing catch with Baba, and he's just grinning and he's smiling and he's glowing. At that moment, when the heart is soft and the heart is filled with love, and at that moment, now take God and what? And insert him into that heart. And say, you know what, that ice cream that you're enjoying? Allah. That bike? Allah. This meal that as a family we're enjoying? Allah. This vacation? Allah. This new toy? Allah. And slowly but surely now, this child now, 8, 9, 10, all these moments of bliss and moments of happiness, now he'll attach to who? God. And then that transition to worship God will be easier. Like I said in the first night, this is not just about parents, right? Raising children is the responsibility of anyone who has influence on those children. So grandparents out there, older siblings out there, teachers out there, be it the fact that you are a Sunday school teacher or a teacher at a public school even. We're trying to raise God-centric children, not just God-centric Muslims, right? We want to now, be able now to revive humanity in this day and age where it's a lost art now, and remove these kids from the selfish individualism and allow them to believe the more you serve others, the better you become. Doesn't matter if your classroom has students of non-Muslims or not. There also are equals in humanity as well. We also need to fight in this human conscious battle with them right beside us. You know how much damage an older sibling can do to a younger one if he's constantly bombarding him and hammering him and killing him in terms of his confidence. You're horrible at this, you're no good at this, blah, blah. All these things now come from the idea of you believing in yourself as a child, and now you helping your child to believe in themselves. So yes, on one side where I feel like today's youth have a lot of excuses and these one and done moments, like they're giving way too much importance to some auntie who sits there and tells you you've gained weight. Or this auntie who tells me in my 3rd year of marriage, why aren't you pregnant yet? When I was your age, I already had 5 kids. Holy smokes, that's good. Good for you, auntie. That's not me. And because of that, I avoid the whole entire masjid because of that one small auntie who maybe is telling you out of love. The tone might not be the best, but the message is that, it's a blessing, and the faster you get blessings, the better it is. I don't know, but to put all of your deen into that one basket of this, and I think to me it sounds a little bit absurd. And we've accepted the fact that I live in this prison because of others, and that's why I'm not as religious. That's why my hijab is not on my head. That's why I don't have a beard. That's why I don't pray salat. That's why my deen is somewhat cultural and ritualistic, and that's about it. Had I had a better Sunday school teacher, Moulana, I would have been Mr. Piety. And I'm like, it sounds a little bit, a cop-out to me. I'm sorry. I'm not saying those things don't exist. They do. And we all went through them. On this side, however, let's present the deen properly to these individuals. Let's let them know that, look, even when those wings aren't there to fly, create those wings. Flourish around you. The examples that the example I've given before is, sometimes when you are in your backyard and you see, or you are in your interlock, let's say for example driveway, these massive now bricks are now interlocking itself to make up this beautiful driveway. If it's not treated properly, you'll start to see roots coming out in between the bricks, right? Sometimes in the backyard, these concrete massive 6x6 slabs now, or 2x2 slabs now, you'll start to believe that, okay, these things are massively heavy. In between the 1 inch between the slabs, you'll see a blade of grass. You think, Baba, how did this grass now grow in between these 2 concrete slabs? The weight of the slab, the darkness under the slab, they must have put some gravel, something to destroy the grass. Pirbi, the heat of that, the heatness now makes its way through the slab and comes out. One small grass, or one small root now, surrounded by darkness, buried by the weight, he found one small sliver of light, and he made his way and grew all the way out. That's called what? Flourishing. I want myself to teach my child and all of you, your children, the art of flourishment. Flourish. When the world now doesn't expect you to grow, that's when you help your child grow. When all the tools around him, let's say, for example, are there to stunt his growth and to be misguided and deviate, that's when the kamal of the iman comes. That's when the perfection of faith comes. That's when you say, you know what? Yes, it's dark. Yes, it's heavy, but I have a 1 small inch of light that I'm going to travel my way towards. And sometimes it is that very light, that is that very darkness that allows us to understand the beauty of what's inside of us. Look, I've been given the example before, I think I gave the example last year in Calgary as well. I'll give you another example. Forget that one. So true story. So I went to Home Depot last year. I've been telling you true stories about myself for the past 4 nights. Home Depot, and I bought these battery-powered lights. Okay, because sometimes when the power goes out in my house, I sit there and I search for, flashlights and candles. We all have our phone flashlights, but still. So now these things are magnetic and they kind of, they stick onto the top of the majority of my doors. So I bought like 6 or 7 and put them, up and down, second floor, first floor, in the basement, whatever the case may be. You press a button and it gives you this nice, beautiful, white, bright lights. Please follow the example, okay? And then we'll move towards Masayib, inshallah. So I buy these lights, I come home, I put them up. Let's say they're placed very strategically across the entire house, such that if the light goes out and it's pitch black in my house, I click a few buttons now, and there's enough light as if the lights didn't go out to begin with. TK, all right, fine. No, I can't wait. Let's see how bright they are. And lo and behold, one night the light goes out. I turn on 6 of them, and 3 of them light up, and 3 don't light up. And the 3 that lit up were very, very bright. And the 3 that didn't had to have their batteries changed. Now, you would think, okay, you can test them during the day, but you just don't, you forget. But now, because it was black and dark outside or inside the house, I was forced to now click the light. And because of the fact that I was forced to click the light, I realized the batteries were out. On top of that, the ones that I did click now, I realized how bright these lights actually were. But both of these realities that were very important to me would not have happened without the initial power outage. If you have a child right now, if you yourself as a child right now are going through a lot, and God knows, man, my kids out there, my youth out there, 15, 16, 18, 21, there's a lot on their plate. They live in a different era altogether. Nothing compared to what I went through growing up, I tell you. Nothing compared to. They live in a very, very judgmental, searching constantly for validation, consumerism, self-promotion, me generation-like atmosphere. And everything the deen says not to be, this society says you have to be. And now you have this vulnerable, weak, easily impressed 16-year-old child looking to hang on to the rope of the deen. If you have any of those kids at home, trying to raise those kids to be God-centric and pious, remind them that, look, sometimes if you are struggling, if it is dark in your world, embrace that darkness. What I mean by that is, take a moment now to look around you. There are certain realities that only come when it's dark. Had it not been dark in the home, I wouldn't have known that these lights need changing. Had it not been dark in my home, I would have not known how bright these lights are. Sometimes we don't know our own strength inside of us until that darkness hits. You don't know the power of the flashlight until the sun sets. It requires the darkness around you for you to understand, whoa, I have this bright flashlight in my hands. Sometimes my youth don't understand the beauty that is within. And my parents out there, you don't have to be so quick to swoop in and save them from their struggles. You know how many parents I get calling me that my kid is 27 years old, Moulana, and is going through this and I don't know what to do. I tell them, and I'm very blunt with them, if he's 27 years old, pura mard hai yaar, he's a full man. This is his struggle. Let him struggle. You pray for him, guide him, give him some advice for sure. You're bil akhir his parents, for sure. But you cannot come in, right? And take him off his own journey and his own jihad. He has to go through that dark moment. Let him go through a dark moment. He'll figure out things that you've already figured out. That's fine, but he has to figure it out. Swooping in as a parachute. Parents say, okay, don't worry, beta, I'll fix it today and I'll give you money and I'll bail you out. Wait a second now, hold on. How many parents call me and say, oh, my son has a drug addiction. Okay, how is he affording these drugs? Well, I give him money. Well, wait a second now. If you're giving him money, then you're aiding and abetting in the addiction, right? Cut off the money. Nay, Moulana, I can't do that. Why can't you do that? It's imperative that we understand, in light of Imam Hassan Askari Shahadat on this night, that even if we believe we've hit rock bottom in that darkness, in that imprisonment, we can still find God. I can still be that blade of grass that finds that 1/2 an inch crack between two massively heavy concrete slabs. Nabi Yunus is inside the belly of the whale. Understand the metaphor here. These whales and these mammals that Nabi Yunus was inside, they do not swim on the surface of the ocean. They swim to the bottom of the ocean, right to the darkest point of the ocean. They come up a little bit, then they go back down, correct? So now you can imagine now, here is a prophet of God sitting in the darkness of the stomach of this whale. That whale is inside the darkness of the waters. Right? The deeper you go into the water, the darker it becomes around you. So now he's in darkness upon darkness. And in that darkness now, he comes to this epiphany that in the Namaz al-Ghufayla we talk about. فَنَادَى فِي ظُلُمَاتٍ أَنْ لَا إِلَهَ إِلَّا أَنْتَ سُبْحَانَكَ إِنِّي كُنْتُ مِنَ الظَّالِمِينَ. In that darkness, فَنَادَى فِي ظُلُمَاتٍ. In that darkness, he calls out. He does nida. He calls out what? أَنْ لَا إِلَهَ إِلَّا أَنْتَ سُبْحَانَكَ. There is no Allah but you. Glory be to you. Right? إِنِّي كُنْتُ مِنَ الظَّالِمِينَ. I'm the one that did dhulm against myself. I was the one that was wrong here. Okay? And it was that very awareness, that very moment of realization, that very aha moment now that allowed God to say, we heard him, we freed him, وَكَذَلِكَ نُنْجِ الْمُؤْمِنِينَ, and we'll do exactly that for the believers. It took the darkness of the belly of the whale in the darkness of the ocean for him to understand, wait a second now, he's not wrong, I'm wrong in this. We are going to spend some time in prison of our mind, the prison of our desires. We take these khaishat and these desires that we have and we put them in prison. We take these thoughts of sin, we put them in prison. Sometimes we even take these moments of faith and it just gets too much and we put that in prison. Sometimes we scratch rock bottom. Sometimes we feel like, you know what, it's a very lonely world to live in and I feel like I'm in prison right now. No one can hear me. But what I've always said to all of you before across my various lectures is that yes, while you are the inmate, you're also the prison guard. Meaning what? You have the keys. Turn around, open the prison and walk out. Why do you choose to be in a prison, as Rumi says? Why do you choose to be in a prison when you can be free? And it's up to the parents now to give them those tools when they are younger. They have rough days at school. Sometimes, my young one who's in grade 2 comes home. How was your day? Oh, it was rough. Grade 2 was rough. What happened in grade 2? Oh, someone took my eraser. Whoa, okay. Let's deal with this eraser now. Right? Sometimes my little guy who's in senior kindergarten, he says, "Oh, I didn't have a good day." I go, "Why, Baba?" "I wasn't able to finish my third snack during recess." "Well, you can finish it now on the way home from school in the car. Go ahead, open your lunch bag and finish it." No, I want to finish it during recess, Baba. It wasn't a good day. I said, "Okay, let's power through that." These are simple examples. As your kids get older, like many of you have older kids, I know, 15, 18, 19, it gets a little bit more real. I'm not asking you to pull them out of the darkness. That's what our fitra tells as parents, especially as mothers, is har hal mein, pull them out of darkness. Don't do that. Guide them through the darkness to find that 1 inch that the blade of grass found. It doesn't matter what state you're in, you're not going to lose the path. Otherwise, this society, if we allow it, will destroy our children. We've lost generations. We've lost our youth. And still, when you talk to a 23, 24, 26-year-old who's drowning in his own difficulties, and she's living in her prison, she still somehow musters up the courage to get up and begin to pray salat, for example, or log in, let's say, tonight and listen to a majlis, even though she might put on a strong front, but inside she's dying on the inside. take that moment that if you are in prison right now, it's, first of all, it's never permanent. You know that, right? One thing that I think all of, especially my parents, should realize, and then we'll move towards Masayib, I promise. There's so much to say about this topic. And I still have one more night tomorrow night, inshallah, and we'll wrap up the topic. But one thing that I want my my parents to realize is that, you're talking about raising God-centric children. I can barely keep my kids alive. If I feed them 3 times a day and they have a proper sleep and they don't kill themselves in terms of like injuries, that's a good day. And then you're talking about this dua and that dua. I'm not talking about that. Everything has a season of life. Everything does. Like right now in Toronto, as it is in Calgary, the season is changing. Okay, we're slowly but surely getting into preparation for our winters in December. So we're treating our grass and we're getting our, our patio furniture, covered up, and we're trying to figure out a good solution for the barbecue outside, and maybe thoughts about winter tires, and all these things are there, right? And then once that season is over, then once again now the all seasons come on the car, and then we're able not to dust off the barbecue and blah blah blah, right? Seasons change. And sometimes I think the problem is that we live as human beings, we live in that season. We think that season is the end all and be all. Right now, there are parents out there who, if they get through one wajib namaz without somebody kicking the mohar or eating the sajdaga or pulling on them or having a tantrum, bahut badi baat hai. That's great. That's why I never tell young parents, never ever tell young parents that make sure after every namaz you recite this 12 times and this 20 times and this 30 times and this. Looking at me saying, Baba, I just got through 4 rakats of jihad with my 4-year-old. You want me to recite, this taqibat, itne padho, wo padho. I'm sorry. If I get through my fara'id, my wajib, that's it. I go, and that's fine. That's your season of life. There come a moment where you can sit there calmly without anybody kicking the mohar and pulling on your pants, and you can sit there and for a moment and be with God. Embrace the season of life that you're in. No seasons will change, and your state will also change as well. Especially my youth out there. Know that whatever state you're in right now, that's going to change. It won't be permanent. Provided that you look at things entirety, not through season. When we're hit with minus 40 degree weather here in Toronto, right? Or we have an ice storm, or we have, we're snowed in, for example, we think, oh my God, it's over. And for a moment, we might think, well, I'm going to live my whole life in snow. No, you're not. Give it 3 months, that snow will melt, and there'll be a burning sun. There'll be plus 35, and you'll beg for the AC. That's how we are. Okay? That's how your situation is right now. If you are right now in prison, one day you'll be out of prison. If right now you are sleep deprived as a parent and you can barely get them through the day without, whatever, then that's fine. There come a moment where all these du'as and these mustahabs and making tasbihs and crafts when it comes to muharram, it'll all be there. Anyways, my point tonight is that in light of the shahadat of our 11th Imam, who did what he could possibly do to to propagate the message from prison, we have to adopt the policy of that and adopt the custom and the sunnat of that. That yes, these are not ideal times for a moment, of course not. But it doesn't mean that we pack things up and we say, you know what, I'm in prison, I can't do anything about it. I wish I could help you. It's not how it is. We do our level best. We find that crack of lights. And as parents, we have to help them. If that means that we constantly reassure them that God's with you, God's with you. Hadith says God is with the oppressed. God is with the oppressed. وَنُرِيدُ أَن نَمُنَّ عَلَى الَّذِينَ اسْتُضْعِفُوا فِي الْأَرْضِ. That Allah desires now, Allah wishes, nuridu, He has this irada, this desire to do what? To bless those who are considered to be weak in the land. The ones who are oppressed, the ones who are looked down upon, the ones who have no rights, the ones who are banned, the ones, for example, who are ridiculed, the ones who, for example, their hijabs are being tugged on, the ones whose names are being ridiculed, for example, the ones who are given this dirty look when they pray salat at work, all these people who are considered to be oppressed on the land, Allah says, I wish to do what? I wish to bless them, to give them ni'mat. I'll make them leaders of tomorrow, the Quran says. The same ones that the superior ones look down on, one day they themselves become superior as well. It's the seasons of life, guys. So the kamal is not to pray for an easy season. The kamal is that while I'm in prison, I don't lose my iman. Because that's where the iman gets lost. It's not before or after the storm, it's right in the middle of the storm. And we have to ensure as parents that we give them all the tools now to grow, to flourish, to find that crack, inshallah. It got to the point where even his last 6 years of his life, from the age of 22 to 28, Imam Askari had gained such a movement, such a strong mission, that finally the only solution that the enemy had was to poison this Imam. And they did. Mu'tamad poisoned him. And he was buried in Samara beside Imam Naqi alayhi salam. And we send our condolences to the Imam of our time tonight. It's not easy to lose a father. It's not easy to commemorate his shahadat every single year. But I don't know what to give condolences for the Imam. Do I give condolences for the death of his father or the end of Ayam Azah? Remember, this is the same Imam in Ziyat al-Nahiya says that I cry for the ashab of Karbala morning and night, tears of blood. I mentioned this before. I always say it whenever I can on the night of the 1st of Muharram, that we are a very ajib nation. We truly are as Shias. We anticipate our grief, we celebrate our sadness, we decorate our gham. We prepare to cry. We find tasalli and we find contentment in crying. If someone doesn't do a good enough job in making us cry, we actually get upset at that individual. There's some of us right now, after 2 months and 8 days of mourning and draping ourselves in black, you would think that we would say, look, it's been 68 days. I'm tired of crying and being so negative and being so sad. But yet there are many of us right now who have a very, very heavy heart tonight, knowing full well that this time tomorrow, we will say goodbye to Ayam Azah. And as difficult as this year's COVID Muharram was for many of us, and Riaz Bhai, mentioned that in his beautiful message, the amount of love was displayed by the centers across the world, if you ask me. And in this online virtual world, I was able to address communities that I would never be able to travel to. And I saw, the money being spent on the technology, the amount of research that people did to ensure that their live broadcast was well done, learning things like Zoom and learning other platforms to bring the mu'mineen, the majalis. And then on top of that, the mu'mineen themselves, to embrace this COVID-19 Muharram, to not break the rules, right? At least, the majority of them, I like to believe, had followed the necessary restrictions, whether it was registration and the mask and the sanitizing and everything. And then on top of that, to create your living room or your home, let's say, for example, or your backyard, for example, into some sort of farsh azah. And not for anything else. No one is paying you for this. No one is increasing your subscriptions or your likes or your followers. All of it is for the love of Imam Hussein. All of it is fine. Maybe it's not the ideal situation this year, but we will get to the ideal as close as possible. So if that means that we drape our walls in black, if that means that I lay down my white chani, if that means that I make my screen the mimbar and I make my living room the azakhana, then so be it. If that means that we're all wearing black as a family, we're sitting on the ground, for example, and we serve tea afterwards, then so be it. How many stories have I heard up and down these past 2 months and 8 days? Of Moulana, we did this, for the first time this happened, for the first time I always dreamed about having a majlis in my home, and every night we had a majlis in our home, Moulana. And that's all the love that we have for Imam Hussein. And with a heavy heart, we say Al-Vida to Ayam Azad tonight. With a heavy heart. We cry when the moon is sighted, we cry when we say Al-Vida to Ayam Azad. Ajib nation we are. We put our black clothes away in our suitcase labeled Muharram, and then we wait. We wait until next year's Muharram, and we pray that all this COVID situation is gone, and that we're able to once again now pack out Husseiniya and do what we've been doing for so many years. And our one dua is that we pray that Sayyidah Fatima accepts our grief. That Shahzadi, for 68 days, our men cried for the men of Hussein. Our women cried for the women of Hussein. Our youth cried for the youth of Hussein. Our kids cried for the kids of Hussein. We did our level best in this COVID-19 Muharram era to somehow uphold the beauty and the ruh and the spirit and the form of the Azadari of your son. Accept our gham, Shahzadi. Accept our grief. Accept our tears. Know that any time that a mother who has lost a Javan son this year or previous years, know that her tasalli, her contentment was that, Hussein also lost a Javan son on the day of Ashura. Know that every time the alim would read about the musibat of Ali Akbar, where my Mola would put one knee on his chest and one foot on the plains of Karbala and grab the barchi of Ali Akbar and turn towards Najaf and say, Baba, come and see your Hussein. Pull a barchi out of the chest of Ali Akbar. That mother who lost her Jawan son would have a sense of calmness. Know that if a niece ever was to lose an uncle, that moment where Bibi Sakina comes running out of the khayma and she sees the alam, but she does not see the alamdar. She simply dries up her tears, goes out to the Maidan of Karbala. Ammu Abbas, your Sakina is not thirsty anymore. If a sister ever lost a brother, that moment now where Imam Hussein is leaving the tent of the women, about to go Asri Ashur, from behind him, Mahlan Mahla, Yabna Zahra, slow down, kya jaldi hai, oh my son of Zahra. And this conversation between the two now ensues. If that wasn't enough, if you've ever lost an infant child, miscarriages, stillbirth, whatever the case may be, think about that moment where my Aqa Hussein is holding Ali Asghar in his arms, walking towards the khayma. How do I tell Rabab, the mother of a 6-month-old, I took your son for water and he had an arrow in his neck? How many times have we said that whatever gham and grief I have been through, Hussein has gone through? How many times have we said that crying for the grief of Hussein has made my own grief now digestible? I ask you, Imam Hussein, to accept our grief, accept our gham. Don't remove this gham of yours. Sometimes it's our lifeline, sometimes it's our identity, it's our salvation. And give us that tawfiq, give us that life, inshallah, that next year now when Muharram comes about, that we once again are able now to lay down the Farishi Azah, drape our walls in black, drape ourselves in black, cry for you like the Prophet promised Shahzadi Qawnayn that we would cry for you. Accept our grief. Don't give us any gham except for your gham, inshallah. سيعلم الذين ظلموا أي منقلبين ينقلبون. Inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi raji'un. We ask you, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to accept our qaleel efforts, inshallah. We ask you, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, accept our gham, accept our grief for Ali Muhammad, inshallah. We ask you, Allah, to give us that tawfiq as parents, as grandparents, as teachers, as those people of influence to raise pious children in this very difficult world. And finally, Allah, one dua that we have on this night of the martyrdom of his father, that you allow us and our families to stand beside him when he comes, inshallah. Matam ya Hussein, ya Hussein, ya Hussein.
الحسين حسين الشهيد الشهيد الحسين حسين الغريب الغريب الحسين حسين الشهيد الشهيد الحسين حسين الغريب الغريب الحسين حسين الشهيد الشهيد دہائی دہائی خدا را دہائی یہ دشت بلا میں ہے کیسی تباہی بہایا ہے کس نے یہ خون محمد قیامت یہ ڈھائی ہے کس نے الہی جوانوں بزرگوں کو مارا گیا ہے شہیدوں میں شامل ہے ننھا سپاہی حسین الغریب حسین حسین الشہید کیا جشن برپا یوں اہل حواس نے شہیدوں کے لاشوں پہ ڈنکے بجائے جلا ڈال آل محمد کے خیمے سکینہ کے منہ پر تماچے لگا ہے جو بیمار تھا اس کا بستر نہ چھوڑا نبی زادیوں پر بھی دھرے چلائے حسین الغریب الحسین حسین الشہید الشہید اٹھی اپنی مرکد سے بنت محمد سیاہ شب کی چادر میں چہرہ چھپا کر گئی کربلا میں تو اس نے یہ دیکھا ہے بوسیدہ کرتے میں ایک لاش بے سر بدن سارا تیروں سے چھلنی پڑا ہے لہو میں ہے ڈوبا ہوا سارا پے کر حسین الغریب الغریب الحسین حسین الشہید الشہید الحسین یا حسین یا حسین یا حسین
الوداع 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 اے حسین الوداع 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 اے حسین یہ صدائے فغاں اور یہ مجلسیں صدائے فغاں ماتم و نوحہ اور غم کی یہ زینتیں چاہتا ہے یہ دل یوں ہی قائم رہے چاہتا آہ پھٹتا ہے دل کس طرح یہ کہے الوداع الوداع گرجیے سال بھر پھر کریں گے یہ غام روئیں گے پھر تیرے غم میں مل کر بہام مل کر بہام اور مر گئے تو یہ ہوگا علام اور اگر مر گئے تو یہ ہوگا علام ہائے افسوس جی بھر کے روئے نام الوداع الوداع الوداع
السلام عليك يا رسول الله السلام عليك يا حبيب الله السلام عليك يا أمير المؤمنين السلام عليك يا فاطمة الزهراء السلام عليك يا أبا محمد الحسن السلام عليك يا أبا عبد الله وعلى الأرواح التي حلت بفنائك السلام على الأئمة التسعة من ولدك وبنيك ورحمة الله وبركاته السلام عليك يا مولاي يا غريب الغرباء السلام عليك يا معين الضعفاء والفقراء السلام عليك يا شمس الشموس السلام عليك يا أنيس النفوس أيها المدفون بأرض توس السلام عليك يا علي بن موسى الرضا الراضي بالقدر والقضاء كن شفيعنا وشفيع والدي في يوم الجزاء ورحمة الله وبركاته السلام عليك يا مولانا يا صاحب الزمان الأمان 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 من فتن الزمان أحسن الله لك العزاء أحسن الله لك العزاء في إمام العسكري السلام عليك يا خليفة الرحمن السلام عليك يا مظهر الإيمان السلام عليك يا شريك القرآن عجل الله تعالى فرجك وسهل الله تعالى مخرجك وظهورك وجعلنا الله تعالى من أنصارك